Hello everybody, you're welcome back again to the Reggae Appreciation Society. The music business is to us fans beautiful sound, bright lights, and dazzling performances from our favorite artists. But what most of us don't see is the wheeling, intrigue, and many times the hidden players who pull the strings, sometimes finance the music, and provide the muscle that protects the artists from other tough guys much lower in the food chain. The Wailers very early in their careers as independent artists were protected by the most dangerous street gang in Trenchtown, and Lee Scratch Perry was also protected by a Kingston crew called the Spanglers. But the international scale of this phenomenon is best exemplified in what happened during the epic tour that was put together to promote Peter Tosh's Mama Africa album and Jimmy Cliff's Power and Glory album. That tour was on the surface a spectacular series of concerts during which Peter Tosh rocked audiences from Germany, Australia, France, and Spain down to the Netherlands. But in America, he would come face to face with the ugly underbelly of its industry when he and his whole crew were held hostage by a promoter and his gang of thugs. These men would seize their equipment and tour buses, and not to mention their money, and had such a stranglehold on the entire system that they had to be rescued by another more powerful group that was none other than members of the New York Mafia, a group which assumed the role of protective muscle for the US leg of that tour. Let's take a look at how Mobsters rescued Peter Tosh and Jimmy Cliff from a gang of street thugs during the 1982 tour of America. By the year 1982, the great Peter Tosh was a free agent, having parted ways with Rolling Stone Records after the release of the album Wanted Dead and Alive, and was then looking to partner with a new label that would issue his upcoming album, Mama Africa. The arrowhead of this task was his then manager, Danny Sims. Sims was an old friend and ally of the Stepping Razor, as his company Jad Records had signed the Wailers a few years before they joined Island Records in 1972. In fact, Sims became Bob Marley's manager after he fired Don Taylor in 1980 and was making plans for his exit from Island Records when the Tough Gong passed away in 1981. Around the same time that Peter left his partnership with the Rolling Stones and Sims took over the management of his affairs. When Peter finished recording the tracks that made up the Mama Africa album, Sims helped him bag a nice deal with EMI Records. As part of that deal, the label gave Sims the free hand to handle logistics and promotion for a world tour, and Sims picked a team to oversee it that included Fred DiCipio and Tommy Vastola, both underbosses of the New York and New Jersey Mafia. One very interesting thing about Danny Sims, who was raised in New York, was his open relationship with crime families on the East Coast of the US. In fact, one of the founding fathers of Jad Records when they signed the Wailers was a man called Joe Amon, one of the leaders of the Gambino crime family. So putting it mildly, the Mama Africa tour was essentially being managed and protected by Mobsters. Danny Sims had huge plans for that tour and got the idea to include Jimmy Cliff, who had just finished recording songs for his new album, Power and Glory. So in August 1982, the 14-week tour would kick off with a scorching show at the San Diego University Amphitheater, and over the next few weeks, the tour rolled on perfectly into September with a show lined up in New Haven, Connecticut. That show was supposed to be two performances on the same night at a venue on York Street. According to Peter Tosh's now legendary logistics manager, Coupland Forbes, the venue for that show was smaller than what was agreed upon with the promoter. That space was so small that it was difficult to even set up their equipment. Or even worse, as it wouldn't allow Peter or Jimmy the room to express themselves properly while performing on stage. The crew held a meeting in which they agreed not to play that show until the promoter got a bigger venue, as they agreed. And when they told the promoter their decision, he tried to convince them, and when it was obvious that they wouldn't budge, he turned aggressive and really nasty and told them point blank that either they played that show or they would be in trouble and would lose their equipment, instruments, and tour buses. When they saw that they were in a tight spot, they agreed to go on with that show, but only for a shorter period. The promoter agreed and the show would go on. Tosh and Cliff both delivered wonderful performances that rocked the house big time. After the concert, Coupland Forbes went to the promoter's office to collect the payments for the show, and that is where things got ugly. Guarding the office door was a huge bouncer who looked very angry to see him and swung at him dangerously with a whiskey bottle, which missed his head by less than an inch. Coupland Forbes took off upstairs into the club as the man raced after him to bash him over the head. He ran to the security guard at the club's door and told him what happened, and the guard's response was also hostile. A hit him on the spot that that guy also worked for the promoter. He saw a police car parked on the street and went over to the two policemen in it and told them everything that just happened. They would ignore his story and instead told him that he and the artists had just 10 minutes to leave the club, and if they didn't, they would be arrested and thrown in jail. It became very obvious that those cops were connected to the promoters. With nowhere else to turn, they abandoned their stuff and snuck away back to the hotel. Copeland Forbes desperately grabbed the phone and called Danny Sims over in New York and told him everything that just happened to them. Sims told him to hold on while he made a call, and when he came back on the line, told Forbes point blank that those guys had no idea who they were messing with. He told him to tell Peter and Jimmy to sit tight while they worked it out. And by sunrise the next morning, the crew's equipment, buses, and money was brought to the hotel with a huge apology from the promoter. Apparently, while Peter, Jimmy, and the entire crew were still sleeping, Danny Sims' associates went over to the club and gave that promoter, staff, and thugs a thorough beating of a lifetime. And for extra measure, they also thrashed and wrecked the club, turning it upside down. And the same night, back in New York, the booking agent that chose that small venue instead of the bigger space that they had paid for also got a vicious beating for embarrassing the organizing team of that tour, who, as we said earlier, were bosses in the New Jersey and New York Mafia. That promoter in Connecticut had been made an example of, and needless to say, the word spread quickly about what happened. As people very conversant with the music business know, promotion and logistics can be very tricky, but as far as the Mama Africa tour was concerned, it proceeded from then on like clockwork. For the remaining 2 months, Peter and Jimmy were paid their money in full even before they stepped on stage to perform. No one dared try to intimidate them, and of course, only the best venues were selected for their shows, as no one dared put them in places contrary to their earlier agreements. The Mama Africa tour would roll through several countries and continents before coming to a glorious end in early 1983, and everyone was happy. The record labels had made their money, the bosses over at Little Italy had successfully ensured the tour was smooth and seamless, and the Mama Africa album became Tosh's highest charting album in the US. And those bosses in Little Italy later allegedly squeezed EMI Records to recoup their investments in the project, but that is a story for a different day. And interestingly, Danny Sims also played a role in getting reggae's mass acceptance in the US, as we detailed in a video about Bob Marley's famous show in New York as opening act for the Commodores in 1980, and we've left a link to it at the very end of this video. So there you have it. Thank you for watching this video today. Please leave a like, subscribe, and until next time, Jah bless.